I'm super excited to host Patric Hellermann, general partner at Fundamental, and I'm hosting his for the second time. Big big fan of his content and also the podcast he's doing with Shub. And it was back in 2018 and 19 when I first like discovered you guys, and there were like only 10 videos on your YouTube. And I'm like, why these guys are doing cool stuff? And then post COVID, now you're podcast, newsletter, everywhere you're like crushing it. So thanks a lot for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Mayor. And you're right. I mean, it was really only in 2022 when we committed to it. So since then, we've had a lot of fun.
I see. So Patrick, you have some amazing, strong thesis on outcome as a service, and throughout your podcast series, even on secondaries, what kind of founders survives in contact. Uh, can you take us where you get the content ideas from, and like how do you analyze what to share, what to write?
It's a great question, and actually, I don't, I don't think anybody asked me that way. Um, so, in case you were hoping for this, the answer is not. Oh, there's a super structured process and a framework that I follow, and this is what I have to do in order to get to the topics that I want to talk about. Unfortunately, that's not the case for me, and I think it's not the case for Shu either. For us, it's I always like to say the job of a VC. Actually, your favorite VC coined the following quote, Mayer, Vinod Khosla. So Vinod said, "Hey, the job of the VC." Um, sorry, I think it's Bill Gurley. Actually, I'm
Oh,
misquoting. Bill Gurley
the
actually
both
said
are
this.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we can attribute everything to Vinod. He's smart enough. No, but Bill Gurley actually said, "Hey, the job of the VC is not to predict the future; it's to observe the present." And I very much agree with that. So once you make too many assumptions, you're stacking them on top of each other, you're most likely wrong about what scenario in 10 years is going to play out and whatnot. So that's exactly how I'm treating my job. And so we're with Fundamental, we're speaking with more than 3,000 founders every year, not just myself. It's,
Mm,
we have a small team. Inside the team, we're doing that. We're discussing it a lot, etc. I probably meet a couple hundred founders a year. And so that's the observation part, right? Is you get to meet people who are in the front lines, in the trenches, etc. And quite honestly, everything is just them teaching me about things that sometimes I already know and oftentimes I don't know. And then it's just being observant, quite honestly, of things that happen. And now back to your question, when you're approaching it like that and you're just staying curious, you're just staying, hey, but why are these things that way? At some point, when you ask yourself, and I ask myself that often enough, one moment it makes click, and I cannot predict when, but one moment it makes click. Hey, actually, if I take these three things together that I've seen over the last 5 years, this seems to be why. And then once I have found something like that, that's when we talk about it.
mm. And how can one develop from surface level observation to like deep? Because a lot of VCs talk to founders, they have few hours, and that's their point of data to understand how deep the problem is, how well the founders know. But they could like make up and exaggerate, and the real problem could be something else. So, how do you, apart from observation, how do you go deeper into insights?
So I'm not sure the answer would be the same for every person that you could have on Mayur. You might get very different questions. So I'm going to tell you what it means for me specifically. So for me, it's two things that I had to first unlearn and then maybe
Mm,
relearn that I can immediately think of to your question. Um, the first thing is in any kind of investment role, when you do it early stage, even when you do it late stage, but especially early stage, everything has to be about repetition. And repetition and routine give you one specific superpower, and that is moving unknown unknowns to known unknowns, and ideally to known knowns. And when you do that, because you do repetition and you move unknown unknowns to known unknowns, that gives you the power to ask questions. When I have a lot of unknown unknowns, though, about a space that I don't have repetition in, I oftentimes cannot even formulate the question that I need to understand. And I say to people, hey, Mario, if you were a founder today in healthcare or in agriculture, I have no repetition. I have no routine. I'm not going to ask you the question that I truly need to understand what fundamentally drives your business, drives where your business can be going in 10 years from now, etc. So that's the first thing. It's the repetition and routine allows you to ask the questions that are necessary. And I see it in a lot of my VC friends that cover many different verticals in generalist funds. The more quirky and the more nuanced a fund is, the more repetition and routine you actually need in order to ask the right questions, and they struggle. And so that is very, very difficult to do when you invest early, say pre-seed rounds, seed rounds, even Series A rounds, when companies are not so obvious by the numbers, you still have to buy into a thesis. You need to formulate that, right? So that's one thing. And the second thing that I had to unlearn and then retrain myself over the course of my investment career is abandon heuristics that other sectors have trained you as an investor. There's a great example. I was literally, true story, I was literally just on a 90 minutes deep dive diligence call with a founder that is building a cloud manufacturing company, similar to what Inframarket is for a space in the Western world in my markets. And I had a discussion with the founder about, hey, when you are a marketplace investor that has marketplace success in the past, consumer marketplace, think Uber, for example, Lyft, or it could be Instacart, etc. Your mindset about a cloud manufacturer could be, hey, let's automate as much of the customer touch points as possible, because that's what my marketplaces actually did. Terrible advice in a cloud manufacturing for construction, because you're having track record that truly scales and that makes customer come back to you. If you deliver, you're reliable, you're easy to deal with. And if you automate that interface to the customer, you're actually taking away that advantage of yourself to convey and personalize that track record. My point here with this example is if you apply the heuristics from other sectors into construction or AEC, it will oftentimes not lead you to glory. And that is something that's my second point. I had to unlearn and retrain myself. I just stopped with the heuristics. I just literally stay interested in the quirks of our sector. And whenever I see a quirk, we call it a vertical singularity, I actually get extra excited. Sorry, that was a bit of a longer answer.
I love the examples. It gives like insights on how like because I think you also mentioned this in one of your podcasts of learning, unlearning as a VC. So I remember this. A fun question is a lot of VC investors ask like, what's the unique domain insight you have and how did you compete? And it makes me wonder if you guys are receiving so many unique domain insight from so many founders, what does it stop you from building a startup from
Oh,
those insights?
because
And since you have access to talent too.
I'm shit at building. That's what it starts with. So if I could be a great founder, I wouldn't have to be stuck with this less value accretive job of the VC investor. Quite honestly, and a lot of the reason why a founder. Let me actually maybe answer a little bit around the corner, Mayur, about like what kinds of founders I gravitate towards now that I've done this for as many for this many years. I have learned to acquire a taste for founders that are non-linear, that have like much like the space that you and I love, they have quirks, they have nuances, and they have done things that no handbook of
Mm,
founders teaches you to do. For example, I love founders that spend a lot of research before they actually commit to a specific company. And then the type of research that they do, you would never Google online how to actually do it. I have a founder that went through a process of becoming a McDonald's franchisee, end to end, the entire process, just to understand how McDonald's evaluates franchisees for his
mm.
potential business in construction, which has some element of franchising to it. That's pretty smart. Hey, is my camera still working?
Yeah, it's a bit frozen.
Frozen, huh?
Yeah.
Sorry. Let me see if I can switch it. Oops. Okay, I can also take this one. Okay, now you see my camera.
Actually, I
This.
say your iPhone.
Yeah. Okay, let's do this. No,
Oh, I see.
quality is a bit
So
worse, but
now I
let's.
know your setup. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No, but back to the point, right? So
Yeah.
he went through this very non-obvious and unteachable process, and I gravitate towards founders who have these quirks and these non-linear ways of actually committing to a problem. I do not very much gravitate towards to founders that actually capture um, or commit to an opportunity because hey, there's some macro writing about
Mm,
it, or some other space has been doing that. Now, back to your question, this requires founders that are in themselves very nonlinear. And I wouldn't call myself that just yet. Maybe in 10 years, because I'm a believer that actually in our markets, more experience makes you successful, not when you're like 22 and I don't have kids, I'm very risk taking. Maybe in 10 years, I can tell myself that. But right now, the people I gravitate towards are better than me in that
mm.
regard.
And on a like basic principle, if the founder is trying to go that pushing that hard to be obsessed about the problem, trying to understand through the research part, does it give it a indication that no matter what they're ready to go to extremes to make the product successful and uh,
I think there's that in my taste, but it's also that I have found that discovery leads to optionality, and optionality leads to long-term success. If you cut the discovery short, you will never reap the benefits that optionality creates for you. And if a founder cuts the discovery short already before they founded a company, how can I expect from them to actually have a very strong flywheel of discovery as they do business? So these founders run the risk of then constantly just narrowing what they are doing too early or repeating what they do too early. I gravitate towards founders that are masters of discovery because of all the benefits of optionality that it creates.
mm, I see.
I mean, because face it, right? So the startup journey over 10 plus years, Mario, you and I, we cannot predict what is going to happen in 7 years in the market, regulation, whatever. These things can move against you, which, by the way, this is something that we not said. So we not said, hey, you control 3 or 4 out of 10 things, and 3 or 4 out of 10 things you don't control, and the other two are just luck. And that's exactly true, right? Which means that if you can't if you can't control like 60% of the factors that could move against you over a 10-year lifetime of your company, sorry, lifetime of you being the founder of the company before you maybe realize the exit that you want, then you need to have an exceptionally strong discovery engine that when the things move against you, you
Mm,
not only know that they are moving against you, but also what to do and what optionality you have in your quiver in order to react to it. That's why discovery is so important to me.
I see. Yeah, lots of in juicy insight there. uh so yesterday I was reading Call for Ideas, and they changed to Call for Curiosity from South Park Commons, another like big BBC firm, and YC also publishes Call for Startups. If you were to have something similar, Call for Ideas for AEC or construction tech, what would you say? Uh, Difficult, put you on the spot.
Uh, Are you asking me about, hey, what do I think of the process of doing something like that? Or are you asking me for the ideas?
Ideas actually. What are some opportunities of building? Actionable
Um,
ideas is all this podcast is about. Okay.
I, s- I do have them, but I struggle with approaching it that way for the reasons. I mean, one of the reasons is what I just explained, just how I think founders should actually discover and fall in love with their opportunity. The other is for me as an investor, I can diligence ideas without the founder to a certain, let's say, altitude of whatever it is, 10,000 feet. But the founder does way more diligence than any investor in the early stages. 250 customer interviews, injecting themselves into totally quirky experiences, and doing things that other founders that wouldn't go to these lengths, including the investor. Because as an investor, in the end, I'm in 10 companies, not just in one, right? And so there's a little bit of that, which means that for me, I can tell you, let's say, ideas, but they are not as validated as they need to be for a founder to actually say, hey, you know what, that makes sense. Um, so that part I struggled a little bit with. But I'll tell you what, I don't understand why. I'll be a bit cryptic. So I won't say what the idea is. I'll just be a bit cryptic.
Um,
So I don't understand why construction robotics companies, um, why is there no systems integrator for construction robotics for construction sites? I don't understand it because it makes a lot of sense to me. Now, what you make with that,
mm,
let's see.
okay. Give me two more of those areas. Like two.
Um, we've had a lot of success with cross-border cloud manufacturing or cross-border marketplaces. And let me actually give you a number because I'm not sure people actually realize just how dominant India is as a cloud manufacturing powerhouse in construction tech. So my partner Shub, he led the original seed round in Zwork. Zwork is a company that has scaled to billions of annualized revenue and 700 million. And sorry, Zwork is based out of India, Indian founders, Indian team, founded in 2018. And it's one of the 3 or 4 companies in the same scale alongside Inframarket in our portfolio that have just done tremendous. Zwork does 700 million annual revenue in the United States. Did you know that?
Whoa.
Didn't know that, right? And that is with US manufacturers and Mexican manufacturers and a little bit of export from India. So it's not like, oh, we're exporting a shit ton to the US from India. No. It's literally they're applying the same model domestically and within the American hemisphere. What that means is the cross-border manufacturing model, it really works. And I was going to say a year ago, there was a really strong, maybe it's still there if you want to dig, but a year ago, there was a very strong opportunity for a great team to actually build a similar type of value proposition for the LATAM to America manufacturing base. I was an angel investor in a company called Prima. These are the founders, amazing founders, and they are taking that opportunity, but that market is so big. There might still be space for someone else to do something like that. I'll give you 2, not 3. How about that?
Mm. Nice. You wanna know interesting insight? So I'm in Bangalore,
Definitely.
the Silicon Valley of India. There is a big like second generation startups who are like built from India for US. And there are like sessions on GTM strategy, sales, like, and even having like a recipe or playbook of how much should you sell your sales team in US and representative in India, and like that's a
I fully subscribe to it, right? I mean, and Shub and I, he's been educating me also on how big Infosys is, TCS, Tata Consultancy Services, right? I mean, they're powerhouses.
yeah. Okay. So do you have any like update on the thesis of outcome as a service?
Any update on it?
Yeah, like you propose it, any validations? Are there any things that changed?
So across the value chain, tons of validations. I would say the least validation and one of the highest convictions I actually have is for the planning and design phase. So we can double click on that. But before that, I'll give you a few examples. So in the renovation stage, for example, my portfolio company Enter in Germany, it's the European market leader for doing audits for energetic renovation. And these audits are very important because they capture the physical substance. And you require the physical substance more so than the energy consumption, actually, in order to design the perfect merit order of the energetic renovation measures. Sometimes it's the windows first, sometimes it's insulation first, sometimes it's a roof first, and then sometimes maybe it's, hey, you should just put a PV on your roof. And so you need to do that. And so this is a business that has absolutely mind-blowing ACVs per audit, and downstream it handles the installation through a marketplace. And potentially some financing mechanics, which I'm not allowed to reveal, but potentially. So, and that is a model that is powered very much by software. Their software is impressive, but they don't sell the software, right? And why should they? Because the ACVs are so good. They have software like gross margins on the product because everything is automated, because the acquisition funnel is efficient now. And so these types of models, which we call outcome as a service, I expect to see more and more of them all over venture, but even more so in our industry, because our industry rewards track record. It is typically a project industry, not a volume industry. It doesn't reward standardization as much. It more rewards, because of the project nature, more rewards track record and the ability to deliver project by project by project. And that is one of the reasons why we have a subcontracting model over this industry so much. And that gels very, very well with founders actually going after the outcome as a service across the value chain. Construction sites, I mean, just look at construction sites. There's outcome as a service everywhere. It's called subcontracting, right? So it's a trained muscle, it's a procurement mode, there's a governance behind it, there's a buy readiness to it. In the planning and design phase, the same model obviously also exists because we have outsourced consultants. You're a trained architect, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We have outsourced consultants that do specialized work for the main architect or the architectural team, etc. But I haven't yet seen at scale a startup that actually addresses the planning and design phase with outcome as a service. But I have seen a few blooming, let's say, seeds that I have seen. Also in that phase for structural engineering reports and structural engineering designs, for example, for MEP designs out of India, Pillar Plus, for example, has pivoted to such a model. And I heard, this is unconfirmed, I haven't heard it from the founders, this is just me, grapevine, that Cove.Tools is actually moving to such a model. So if true, I would take that as a big validation of our thesis.
That's amazing. I was reading a blog post from Foundation Capital, and they are big on like initial the era of software where and then you need a human to like train and use the software and replacing that with a system of agents and whole workflow. Uh, how likely you think uh, AEC will have like bunch of agents, or is there a future, or there is like it's a bit overrated, hyped of AI agents for our industry?
I think both of what you said is true. I think it is overrated and overhyped in the short run, and it's probably very true in the long run. That's how I'm approaching it. And there's two perspectives here, how you can be excited or not excited about it. One is the customer perspective, and the other one is the investor perspective, both of which are important in my mind. From a customer perspective, I think there's so much to be excited about when it comes to agentic AI in our industry, because it has the potential to actually truly take away mind-numbing tasks, tedious tasks, and the job of, let's stick with the architect and that profession for a second. I mean, the sweatshops of architecture, they could literally go away, and it would empower a lot of architects to become their own bosses that today maybe have to sweat for someone else. I mean, there are 600,000 architecture firms in the entire world, on average 2.5 FTE, but a bunch of them have 10, 100 or 1,000. Why shouldn't, with agentic AI, everybody become their own business owner? There's no reason I can see. In fact, that's a future I would be willing to believe more in than that the power gets more concentrated in the AEC industry. And we can double click on that. But that's like a customer perspective. From an investor perspective, I find it insane. And sorry, I'm an early stage investor. That's important for the context. So I invest leading pre-seed rounds, I lead seed rounds. Sometimes we co-lead Series A rounds. It doesn't get earlier than that. So for an investor at those stages, I find it right now exceptionally tricky to back founders that pitch agentic AI for X. Of course, I'm aware of what Y Combinator thinks. There will be a vertical agent for everything. And, I think one of the examples that they gave was like for landscaping. Okay, whatever, right? So that's their thesis. And I get why they're having it, and I'm not even disputing that. But I find it tricky if you have to commit to finding the one winner at a seed stage in an era where AI not only develops insanely rapidly, but also it democratizes insanely rapidly. I find it very, very tricky for me as an investor to pick the horse at a seed stage in that time. And that might also be mean that for a founder, it could be very tricky to make a similar bet.
Mm, yeah, I think like both uh, point you shared can be deep dive. Uh, one thing I don't have the data, but you're very data driven, and I've seen your blog post. What is the median evaluation of most of the design startups? Because we know there's like unicorn, and but part of my like what I've done market research from the number of firms, the appetite to pay for a software service, I think like 10 to 30 mil TAM is most of the startups, but I'm like totally off, could be off, but I don't have the data to back this up. uh,
Um, so you have to just contextualize one thing, and then I'll answer your question. That in the early years of any kind of startup, the startup will be way overvalued if you apply traditional valuation metrics tied to revenue, gross margin, contribution margin, EBITDA. That is just the nature of venture. You can like it, you can hate it, whatever. It's just factual observation. Whereas if you have a company that is maybe around for 10 or 15 years that has reached a scale, that's when these valuation metrics work a little bit better. The way the early stage metrics work is oftentimes, and that's especially true for design tooling, which has very high minimum feature sets. You do need to invest person power, you need to invest time that comes with money in order to actually reach the minimum feature set to be customer satisfying. Um, you will need to build for 4 or 5 years until you can reach that threshold. And during that time, you might be making, no meaningful amount of revenue just yet. The way these companies then get valued is, hey, here's an amount of money that I feel good about giving you because that's the resources that you need in order to unlock the next, for example, product milestone or the next distribution milestone. You are only willing to dilute this much. And when I basically, multiply the two, divide the one by the two, then I know the valuation. That's the truth. Now, that can catch up with you later, though, to your point, right? So once the company then has reached the threshold of feature sets, hey, you need to demonstrate to me that you can actually distribute it and can reach scale in a capital efficient way. And so at that point, I value you, or my following investor after me, succeeding investor, will value you that way. So that can be a break in the threshold. So now with that context, back to your question. So in the design tooling, that means that most of the companies will be valued the exact same way. There are outlier cases like Pantheon, which I'm sure everybody saw that round, that will get disproportionately large early rounds. Most of them will typically follow a curve like, hey, 4 to 8 million of a pre-seed valuation, maybe 10 to 20 million of a seed valuation, and that's US dollars. And again, you can be below that or above that. And then around a Series A, it could be between 30 to 70 of a valuation. And then after that, if you have a very, very high minimum feature set, like an authoring tool for computer-aided design, even the Series B could still be valued in a similar way, like 100 to 150 million valuation. After that, you have to catch up on basis of revenue, EBITDA, the capital efficiency of your distribution, etc. So after that, basically everything becomes, what your business is.
yeah, like I totally get this. What I was coming from in the perspective of like revenue and like multiplying 3 to 6, whatever the factor you use, like the potent, like how do I explain this? Like I know how the appetite for an architect to pay $500 versus $5,000 software, and how much the adoption rate could be. So if it's as per this theory, Series B is 150 million, like mo- a lot of startups die, or a lot of startups saturate at particular valuation or particular revenue. So that's what I was trying to get. Like what's like maybe 5 million ARR is like where there's a lot big
I see what you're
median. Yeah, yeah.
asking. Ooh, I actually don't. So the pyramid or the funnel that you're trying to ask me for, Mayur, is actually much more tapered than you might
Okay.
think. So the amount of AEC tech startups that actually, but let's say software companies, because marketplaces have a different growth function. and revenue means something different there. But if you go after software companies, the amount of them that actually do reach 5 million in ARR is actually small. I wouldn't venture a guess. I don't want to venture a guess now, but it's much, much less than many people might actually think. The ones that reach 1 million, I'll probably see a couple, I don't know, a couple dozen, maybe a couple hundred every year that reach that
Mm.
milestone. It doesn't tell me much though, right? If you very smartly and narrowly pick a segment, and you have some means to develop the software, which it's getting more and more democratized. You can build very basic software today in 2 weeks without knowing a line of code.
Yeah.
It's not that difficult to get to 1 million in ARR. Now, what's difficult is to get to 1 million in ARR that actually allows you to be more repeatable to the next 10 and the next 100. So that part of the first million ARR is very difficult. But if you went about it as in, let me just find a very, very hyper-focused niche and I overfit my product. And because it's a niche, I know how to distribute to them in a very efficient way. It doesn't tell me much that you have reached 1 million ARR. And I would say that's a lot of AEC techs that I have seen reach the first million ARR, but actually was not repeatable beyond that.
Ah, that's an interesting insight. But I see. We have some comments. So Kyle said, architects are essentially lawyers at the earlier stages. Right? Jordana has a question.
But by the way, just reacting to it, I like Carl's comment here. I like the thinking, and it's true. I think it's not exactly my space, but like I said, I have obviously, and as you all, I have very good friends at generalist firms, and yeah, they have backed a lot of AI for law firms, SMB software for law firms, and I'm sure currently there's also agentic AI being like a darling for law firms. There are law aspects, or what is the nature of law? The nature of law is, hey, I know a bunch of hyper-specific regulation, and not necessarily do I know always the wording of it, but I know where to look it up and in what context I need to think of it. That in the end is the profession of a lawyer, right? It's not that they have memorized everything, but they know these two things. And depending on which stage in the, let's say, planning and design, feasibility, or pre-construction process you're in, I could see how that is actually the same. There's one key difference, Kyle, that would come to my mind here. The lawyer has insane repetition and frequency on the same task. In the early design, in the early stages of the whole AEC process, feasibility, planning, design, pre-construction, my experience has been with founders that address that the same task or the same workflow would be done by an architect for, let's say, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. After that, sorry, task closed, moving on to a different task that requires you to do different things. Maybe there are firms that are like hyper specialized, AE firms that are hyper specialized, where the architect would only do that, but on different projects. Then I think it would be very comparable, and the metaphor is very evident.
I see. And we can also maybe address this qualities or strategies that stand out to you uh, from a founder's perspective as an investor in AEC space. What specific traits, approaches, or decisions make a founder or startup vision compelling enough for you to invest?
Yeah, Jordana, we did indeed cover it a little bit at the top of the conversation. But just to summarize, so I'm gravitating towards founders that are super quirky, that do non-linear things in order to discover, and that commit a lot of time to actually discovering something. And this is only indirectly connected to your founder question, but it leads you back to the founder that I gravitate towards, and that is, I look for hidden in spite of obvious markets. I look for markets that actually no generic founder ever wants to look into because, oh, it's so difficult, or, oh, there's no overfunded, overhyped company in the US, so why should I commit my time to that? All of these founders that look for like copycat type models don't interest me. What I'm interested in is actually these opportunities that, I don't have to compete for a number of years after I started. And if I keep my mouth shut, which my portfolio companies, for the most part, when I do the first raise with them, actually choose to do, not because I tell them, but because they find a similar logic. Then you can build a little bit in quiet without too much competition. Don't giving your customers too much, substitution choice, etc. That has a lot of advantages, and so that's why I gravitate towards founders who have the same like appetite and taste.
I see. Uh, from 2024, like if I were to ask, what are the most saturated space of ideas you have been pitched, and what are a space where there were not much founders who pitched it, but you wish there were more founders?
Two of them actually. So one is on-site reality capture, and I don't mean scan to BIM, because actually the to BIM pipeline is still an unsolved process and problem. But the on-site reality capture, it's like vastly saturated, and you can actually see it in the numbers. So we publish here at Fundamental what we call the AEC Tech Internet Index. You can find it at aectechinternetindex.com, and what we do is we analyze the web traffic of the, I think it's currently 150 most funded AEC tech startups. I think on average they're above, sorry, at minimum they're above 25 million of funding. I just have to make a cutoff somewhere. It's completely random, the cutoff point. And so we analyze the web traffic. And what you can see is that open space is insanely dominating the on-site reality capture. But as a category as a whole, it's not just open space, but there's the category in itself gets a lot of adoption, traffic from customers. And I see it also in pitches. I see it when I speak to my, friends in the ecosystem, in the network, the corporate. So that's one space. And that's great because we need these examples of spaces also saturating and then potentially consolidating. And by the way, that is one thing that I wish construction is going to create. So construction tech ACT is going to create. It's like mega consolidators. That will be fantastic for a lot of founders that maybe found companies that are just very, very good. Not all of them can IPO. So having mega consolidators is going to create a great pool of liquidity. So that's one. And two, the whole feasibility process has a bunch of companies that do generative design and generative capabilities in order to allow, for example, developers quicker assess the potentials of certain spaces, lots, etc. It's I would say, if I really went through all of my notes, I would probably find 50 companies doing something quite similar in all of the space. And look, I get it. Every founder, hey, I'm differentiated. I do things
Yeah.
differently. And sometimes all you have to do better is distribution. It
Mm.
doesn't always have to lie in the product. I can say that by experience. But to your question, it is one of the more saturated spaces.
And non-saturated, or like opportunities where, okay, it maybe it ties back to
You already asked me.
yeah, yeah, it's like, okay, any stories of a deal you said no to and later like you regret it?
Later regretted it. Um, It might be open space actually. So my partner Adam wanted to do open space in early 2019. We're very, very good terms with Jivan. I think Adam would also call Jivan a friend. Um, and we had just done the Holo Builder investment from someone else on the team. And so Jivan was not entirely comfortable with us, and then also coming into open space, although we did make an offer. So it was not technically a no from us. It was technically more like, hey, guys, let's maybe stay friends. So that could be something that I regret. Other than that, I would have to think about it. The thing with regret is, so for me, it's only regret when, actually, I do have an example. We passed on the very, very first round of Infra Market, the pre-seed round. And if we had made that investment, then I could buy a soccer club now.
Damn. Okay, that, that hurts me listening to it.
Yeah, we're fine. We're well off. But that would be
Yeah,
not an order of magnitude, but almost larger than.
I see. Amazing. Any tips on, from all the things you see from your founders, on distribution hacks? Anything you would like to share?
I love that you asked that. I think the number one observation that I have is that founders over obsess with product and they under obsess with distribution. I like it's a metaphor I made up. I don't know if it makes sense to anyone but me, but I'm using it still until someone tells me to, grandpa, shut the fuck up. But so the metaphor I'm thinking of is always this, right? So your product is a key to a lock in a door. The distribution is how many doors with the same lock you can actually produce. So your product, if you can only find one door for it, actually is not very high value. It doesn't matter how much time you sunk into it, how much you love it, how much the one customer tells you knocked it out of the park. In the end, if you can't mass manufacture the doors coming to you with the exact same lock that your key fits in, you don't have a big business. And a business in the end is only three things. It is a product sold to a customer in a channel, and all of that needs to be repeatable. It can't be, hey, every time I need a new type of a customer, or every time I need a new type of a channel. That's not a business, guys. So founders, and I think honestly, the VC industry is to blame here because, or at least partly to blame, because VCs write so much about obsession with product, etc. Guys, you need to be very good at your product, but only just as good as your customer needs it, especially in AEC tech. But you need to nail distribution. That is literally the difference between 1 million and 100 million. The product is not. The product will evolve as you go, as you distribute, you will discover, you will create optionality. Customers will, if you have the track record and what we call in German the barn smell, that's actually a good thing, but it means that, hey, I have a right to be in the room and people take me seriously. If you have that, customers will tell you what they need in the product, and your engineering team, if you made it to that point, will be fantastic. But the distribution is what actually gets you from the 1 to the 100, and founders under obsess with it. The hacks now, that is very context specific, Myra. I couldn't tell you one that is universally applicable, but I'll maybe answer with an example. So I have a company that I have a relationship with that builds software for contractors. And these guys, for the most part, tried the distribution the way that, most of venture would teach you to do it. And then they say, let's play online, let's, open the marketing valve and good things will happen. What these founders discovered later down the line, and in hindsight, they said, hey, I wish I had listened to you and done it earlier, is go offline. Go to the trade fairs, go to the exhibitions, go to the community meetings, go to the association meetings. Make sure that maybe you get a pizza truck to a construction site and socialize with the people there. Build a network of offline sales agents that actually knock down the doors on the construction sites. Again, this is in the context of contractor software type business. And once they did that, all of a sudden the ARR grew very well and much more efficiently. So it will always be context specific, but what I can say is that usually the things that work in other sectors with distribution, they don't work in construction. Construction has its own quirks and thus needs the own quirky distribution hacks.
Yeah. So, do you have any opinion how long should a founder-led sales should be until they hire like a sales like?
Very long. That is my very strong conviction, actually. So in the end, I think it was Sam Altman actually who said 1 or 2 weeks ago. I don't listen to Sam very much, but this one I really, really like because it correlates with my experience and things that I have grown convicted of. And he said, hey, if you do your job long enough, at some point everything becomes a sales job. And that is true. Actually, the more successful you become, the more you grow in your career as an employee, or you become your own business owner / founder, your job becomes more of a sales job. It can be fundraising, it can be hiring / recruiting, and it's going to be selling. So that's one reason. Two, the discovery engine that I was talking about earlier becomes worse and worse the more filters you build into your organization. So things will naturally get filtered, and sometimes they get over embellished, depending on capabilities in your team, incentive systems. The larger you grow, become a little bit different in your organization, and so filtering and embellishment happens. And so the more you remove yourself from the sales function, the worse it actually is. I used to work, when I was employed, I used to work for a CEO of a large Fortune 500 company, managing 20 billion in annual revenue. And this guy made it a principle that he would actually fly 46 weeks in the year from country to country that his organization was doing business in. And he would meet with manufacturing lines as well as with customers directly, and he would cut out the middle management. That's what it takes. And so, in my opinion, founder-led sales never ends.
That's a good one. And one thing I like heard from like Paul Graham that founders should do things that don't scale. Any stories you have to share, or do you believe in that?
I have an anecdote from today. So I got a monthly update from one of my portfolio companies, which is building software for enterprise contractors. They raised a pre-seed round. Probably in a few months here, they will do, I think, a very good seed round. It's early, which is exactly to your point. And so in the monthly update, they were sharing several customer wins, and they were also sharing, hey, these two customers, we thought we would convert them, but we lost them after a POC. And here's why. And so I was then getting on the phone with the founder, and I told them, hey, at this point, you could very simply avoid these conversion fails if you repeated only the ones that already worked, because you know how to describe them, you know to find them. They do a very good segmentation. The problem with that is your discovery stops. So I said, actually, we're at a point where we don't want to cut out those non-conversions at this point, because in the end, contrast is only visible when you have light. Light is what throws shadow. If I take away my wish to see the shadow, I will never find the contrast. So that's a metaphorical way to describe how I'm thinking about this. So in the early days, you want to do all those things that in the end turn out not to work, because that's what tells you what you should repeat.
Well, I think PG meant in the sense of like uh, distribution or like doing like extreme things.
No, it could be
Uh,
everything that
or
PG
could
meant,
be
right? So
okay.
PG meant, sorry, I'm putting words into his mouth, but
Okay.
that's how I interpreted it always when I read his quote in Meyer. So I always interpret it as, and by the way, Zuckerberg is also saying the exact same
Yeah.
thing, is, hey, it could be in your product that you actually build in features there that don't work. It could be that you actually change the shipping process of your engineering team that sometimes doesn't work. It can be in the distribution, right? So anything about your organization in the end needs to have a scale function, right? And so in order to find what the scale function is, I need to see the shadow of it. That's at least my philosophy with my founders is I need to figure out the unscalable part in order to know what I want to repeat. That's one of the ways how I interpret this.
I see. Do you go to any conferences in AC?
Zero, not at all. No, but you knew that answer, didn't you?
It's for people who might want to catch you in person and pitch. I don't know. So
I'm very easygoing. Okay, so here's a personal fact. So the reason why I don't go to conference, there's multiple reasons. One, I don't like to travel very much. I'm not, I have no fear of flying or anything. So it's just I'm a hermit, and when people interact with me on a business basis, they oftentimes don't believe me when I tell them, hey, my private life, I'm an introvert. Like I'm very, very much just good with my wife, my dog, and our little family, both mothers that are still there, etc., sister, brother. But I like to spend time on my own. And so when COVID hit, over here it was February 2020 when it really started to hit. We all had to go our ways into the home offices, etc. And for me, that was a pivotal moment where I realized, hey, actually, my relationships got better, not worse, and my job got I got better at decision making. And I realized that because in the end, my job is nothing but decision making, and I reap the fruits of my decision, or I bear the bad outcomes of my decision making a year or 10 years down the line, which means that, and I have imperfect information, which means that the decisions that I make, they do benefit from my time to acquire information and process information. The more I sit on an airplane, the more I spend time at, let's say, marketing events, etc., that don't contribute to me actually having time to acquire or process information, the worse my outcome of the decisions that I take today will be in 5 or 10 years down the line. And that is very, very difficult in my business because I don't get to repeat my decisions, right? So for me, I literally take maybe 6 of these decisions a year, 3 investments, maybe 3 follow-ons, etc. I better nail them, right? And so for me, that's what I realized during COVID when I was forced to actually not travel anymore, etc. I felt like, hey, my decision making gets better, and that's why I so far have stuck to this.
That's a very interesting take. I see.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
think I've ever shared it with anyone. So,
yeah, like you're cutting all the noise. Not even like serendipity of finding something.
but hey, I do host founders in my home. So last week, for example, I had an Australian founder come here, and we spent the whole day. So it's not like I don't do it. It's just I'm a different way of doing it.
Yeah, yeah, I see. Uh, Anything on the lines where I was comparing, like there are other AEC I won't name, but they have like cohort based early stage. You are also in pre-seed. Is there a reason you don't have like cohort based startups onboarding, or like
Um,
a batch of 10 startups funded in a like summer, fall, like YC type?
okay. Now I need to stay disciplined, not to go too far. Okay.
I didn't think it was this difficult, but okay.
Um, Generational companies do not repeat. And generational companies all have their own ingredients. And they can literally come at you at any given point in time. They do not follow a schedule. So if I want to be the supporter of the most generational companies with the most quirky ingredients, I need to have my business open 24/7. And I don't have to create an artificial schedule for founders to, you know, tell me their story and their ambitions. So I would say yeah, that's not.
That's a good. But what if in the cohort, a lot of people sometimes also benefit from other startups, how they are approaching sales or how they are figuring out distribution, so that the how do you encourage that within your portfolio?
Yeah, so I think that's great. I just don't think you should give away equity for that, quite personally,
Mm.
because the liquidity of great experience and competence in most, it's not true for all, but most of the venture markets out there, definitely like West Coast, definitely New York, definitely London, Berlin, Paris, definitely Bangalore. Um, you don't need to do that in order to foster the same experiences. You can literally get on the phone and try to network your way there, and that's what my founders do, and I open doors for them. We do host ways for our founders to interact with each other. I don't want to give it away too much because it's a little bit behind the doors how we're doing it, but that is something that's very much appreciated. That being said, I think you should never rely on the family that you're part of only. I think it's very important. At least that's something I can encourage the founders I work with. Hey, this is only one of your family. You have other investors that have other families. You have families
Mm,
outside. So never rely on the one. And I think anyway, like that's something that feels very instinctive to the great founders anyway.
I see. And one of the I'll wrap up the interview with this last question. Do you have a meeting, or I can?
No, I'm just letting my sorry, I'm not in board meeting, but we'll finish this one strong.
Okay. Uh, Sorry for that. It There's a perception that if once you have give equity to investors, they like dominate the vision or like control the directions, and like things. There are stories where founders and VC split apart because they want something else. So how do you conduct your like founder update meetings? What are your expectation? How to impress Patrick? Like what is the metric?
I actually don't know how to impress me. I don't know, and I don't think that's what anybody needs to strive to. Just find the people in your camp that will make you great, and if I can be one of those, that's fantastic. But there will be other people in your camp. So just on that part. So on the uh, I think if you have an investor that tries to influence and control, you are already in for a very, very tough ride, and unfortunately, that's a mistake that you might have made. Um, because the problem with an investor like that is, and I see it with former founders more so actually than with investors who weren't former founders, is that these investors would be making decisions with 100 to 1,000 times less information than the founders. So, how much more likely is the investor to actually know better than the investor? Not very. In fact, that investor would be very likely not to have better decision making abilities just because so much more nuanced information is missing. That's how I conduct my founder update meetings, or the few boards that I'm a part of. Is it's 95% listening. When I get asked, I typically respond with a question or observation. Sometimes I get forced for an opinion, and then I would say, hey guys, look, this is really just an opinion. Some of it is speculation. It happens. The founders that work with me longer, they do that less. People, for some reason, they crave for opinions where they should really crave just for informed facts and observations. So that's one. And then every now and then, when I see there's a topic on the table that I really have experience, like fact-based experience that relates here, that's when I will actually then unmute
Mm.
myself and say something, again, starting with an observation, etc. And what happens a lot with me is actually that people will ask me for an opinion in these update meetings or board meetings, and I say, sorry, I don't know. I have no competence. I'm better to shut up. Because the worst thing, and I absolutely hate it, is in general in life, people who don't know their boundaries and when they should actually shut the fuck up. And I hate it the most in VC. So when they actually influence decision making, when they should just not really have any opinion, that's something I absolutely cannot stand. And luckily, the best founders, they will never fall prey for it. So that's fantastic.
Amazing. Yeah, because it somehow it feels like doubling growth every year or 20% every month. It creates that mental pressure on a founder once you got the VC money, and then some people like take it, oh, I'm not enjoying as I used to be because of this external pressure. So I just
Yeah,
wanted to clarify.
I don't have a single relationship with founders that ever worked like that. I'm more a person that tries to help with the fundamentals of the business. And to be fair, it's easier for me to be that way than for a Series A investor, because in the stages where I invest with my first check, and most of my relationships are, it's not yet about hitting that ARR growth, etc.
Mm.
It's more getting the fundamentals right and discovering the right things, creating the right optionality, etc. It's a little bit more difficult to do that when you're a Series B investor. So at that point, you're closer to private equity, and then some of the things that you described take over.
Amazing, Patrick. It was lovely hosting you. Lots of amazing ideas and insights. Uh, as usual, I had a great time hosting you.
Same here. Thanks for